Our next speaker is Sid Stivland, who will speak to us about sharing birds, birding, and conservation with kids. Sid was born and raised on a farm in Pope County, so he grew up around domestic and wild animals. But his interest in birds grew when he and his wife started feeding birds 40 years ago and thus paying more attention to them. They traveled frequently in those days, and travel definitely widened their interest in wildlife, especially birds. Eventually, they joined bird-related organizations such as the National Audubon Society and the Minnesota Ornithologists Union, and participated in sponsored group outings and trips. And again, there's another plug for MOU field trips and CNC bird walks, because it is a wonderful way to learn how to bird. Around 12 years ago, Sid joined the MOU's Youth Mentorship Program. Since then, he has conducted and participated in dozens of mentorship programs, both in and outside the classrooms of public, parochial, charter, and special needs schools in the Twin Cities metro area, as well as outstate. Most recently, he has led birding groups at the Bell Museum on the University of Minnesota St. Paul campus. This man knows his birds. Thanks, Sid. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Well, thank you, Susan. I should start out by saying, what a morning. I thought Susan and Jen and her staff here were doing a fantastic job before that, but now I consider them miracle workers. I can get this thing going this morning. We drove down from Plymouth, and we turned an hour drive into a 2-hour drive, and we drove past a lot of cars pointing in different directions in the ditches and so on. I guess they must be sightseers. I don't know. Anyway, this morning it's my privilege to share with you some of my what I have learned over the past 12 years or so working with youth, and anything related relating to birds and anything else relating to birds. In fact, since I'm a relative newbie at this, I consider myself a newbie, even though I've been at it for a few years, compared to many of our highly experienced volunteers, especially those with years of classroom experience. I'm quite sure there are others who are eminently more qualified than I am to discuss education techniques and so on. So this discussion will focus exclusively on stories and anecdotes that I hope will illustrate some of what goes into working with kids and birds. I would like to actually start out by talking about the history of it. However, I don't think we have time to go into that. There is a slide coming up that lists some of the things that happened, but I do want to highlight that the Minnesota Ornithologists Union sponsored the Youth Mentorship Program. It hit the road on November 19th, 1999, and it was a core group headed by Dr. Robert Holtz, otherwise known to most of us as Biology Bob or just plain Bob, and 3 other committee members who were Tom Bell, Brad Baldwin, and the late Mark Alt. And these people took something from just nothing, and within 3 years had recruited 60 volunteers statewide, had secured funding for binocular kits. And I remember at the paper session in 2003, Bob reported that these volunteers had logged over 11,000 student contacts. By 2011, that number had actually gone over 90,000 student contacts. I wouldn't be surprised if by now, even with the COVID hiatus, we could be over 250,000. I don't know. I haven't seen the figures lately. So this is a serious effort on the part of the MOU, and it was started as an effort to develop a program that have some lasting effects. And I see in May's presentation too, that's also a very big goal, is to have something that has a long-lasting effect. So this is at this point what I'm planning to talk about here is enthusiasm. These are some of the things that I have learned from the classroom. Enthusiasm, openness, flexibility, and humility. And I don't know if I'll have time for the devices, but we'll see how it goes at the end here. But to begin, enthusiasm is an absolute necessity. This is not even something that's negotiable. I suspect there's hardly a single MOU person that doesn't meet this requirement. Some of us may even have heard from friends or family, whatever, maybe called it obsession. But in any case, anyway, this is something that has to be done. And actually, it is noticed by every teacher that I have ever worked for, has noted it and has gone out of their way to mention it in their communication with me. So that's all I need to say about it. It's a necessity. The next item there, openness. We can go to the next slide.
Yep.
Oh, I guess the next one.
Yep. There we go.
Oh, this slide, going back to this slide, even though I don't really want to take that much time, these are just some of the highlights of the history. If anybody's interested, there's a number of milestones there. We'll keep, when I mention openness, I'm talking about, these are the schools that I have visited pretty much. I think I've got most of them on here. There are a number of public schools, including the school that I'm currently working at, which is the Plymouth Creek Elementary. It's a third grade class that I visit every week. And we talk about that a little bit later. Some of the other ones, the Prior Lake Savage Public Schools had for many years a sponsored program that was so popular that the kids had to enter a lottery in order to be accepted into it. So Steve Weston and I were often tagged for leading the bird portion of their annual event, which was several hundred kids actually out at the McCall Ponds Learning Center. There are some other schools there. We'll get into that in a minute. There are also a number of specialized schools, and we'll talk about those a little bit. And the others are just kind of the usual things that don't fall into any category particularly: Girls and Boy Scout groups, sportsmen's clubs, and of course the state fair. So
there we go.
Okay, so enthusiasm is I guess I have already covered that a little bit. There are actually 16 synonyms in the thesaurus. So take your pick. There they are. Okay, so now we're going to talk about learning from our failures. One thing you can count on working with children, especially younger children, is that your feedback, or shall we say their appraisal, will be immediate, unvarnished, and direct. That is blunt. The photo here, the next one, is a photo from the Glacial Lake State Park. I led the group there there's a charter school in Starbuck, Minnesota. And on one occasion, just before the lunch hour, of course, the birding had slowed down, and it was hard work. This was also a class that had covered all the way from 1st through 6th grade. Well, one first grader put his hands on his hips, looked at me, and goes, "This is boring." And actually, I had to agree with him. It was kind of boring. So we had to work on finding some nests and some other things, and it was fine. But later, in another school, this was another school in the district. This is actually the Gleason Lake School, which is the school where where the children in my neighborhood attend. I was asked to lead the bird group on a bigger event they had there. The first group, which was the older kids, went very well. We did our classroom session, and then we went out to look for birds. The only problem was that whoever was responsible for filling the feeders forgot that day. So again, we had to kind of work a little bit at it. However, over lunch, it started to rain. And I came back after lunch and this time got the first and second grade class. Well, so of course I take out my finely tuned work of art PowerPoint and start doing my dog and pony show. And within, I'd say 5 to 8 minutes, I lost them completely. They were paying zero attention to me. And so luckily, a teacher the school had assigned to accompany me assessed the situation, sprang into action, and started the kids drawing pictures about birds and so on. Next one. There's a couple of samples. There's a hawk and an owl, and so we managed to salvage a little bit from that. Later, in another, several years later, I had a call from a neighbor who was interested. He calls up and he said, I have a friend here who has a class and would like to know more about your project. So I explained what we did and how we, talked about the birds and so on. And I said, so what grade is your class? Oh, well, it's a preschool. So at first I panicked, and then I decided, well, wait a minute now, I'm an engineer. Let's look at this analytically. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, they can't attack me. I mean, so this is not going to be, they can't hurt me. They might embarrass me, or I suppose more accurately, I could make a fool of myself. But then again, that wouldn't be the first time and probably wouldn't be the last time either. So I said, sure, I'll try it. What the heck? They're just kids. So on the assigned day, I went out to the school. A teacher met me at the door and brought me in, and we sat down and visited a little bit back and forth, got to know each other. And I started down, you can go to the next. This is my battle-scarred bird poster. We started going through the birds and just talking to the kids about the birds. Well, they knew the pheasant and they knew the ducks and the, various, they even knew the owls, and they knew the bald eagle and so on. We kept going. Robin, pretty soon I'm going, I can't stump these kids. Well, eventually I got to the chickadee, and that finally stumped them. So they're sitting there, well, is it a woodpecker or is it a sparrow? No. So finally I said, okay, well, I'll give you a hint. This bird sings his name. And instantly, the little girl goes, oh, chickadee. Well, now I'm impressed. These kids were very difficult to stump. So we sat there. You can go to the next one. I went to my backup, which is a feather display. These are turkey feathers, which are harvested legally. And in those days, I even had enough feathers that each kid could take one home with him or her. But those kids sat there for almost 40 minutes. And even the teachers went, wow, I never saw that before. So since then, I've always respected the power of nature. I know Mae Vang had talked quite a bit about that too, but there's no question in my mind. So that's even more so. That was brought home to me even more several years later, when a friend of mine called and wondered if I could do a bird program at her school. It was a school in Robbinsdale district, and it was located at the Sandburg School. This school was a special ed school. Every kid in this school was a very special ed kid. And so I came to the school, and all I knew was that these were special ed kids. So I came to the classroom and two of the kids were completely nonverbal. One was partially verbal, and all of them had very serious disabilities. But we went through all of our birds, and some of them had to communicate by writing. We had to stop several times to settle. And but we had a good time, and we spent some time at the end with the binoculars, teaching them how to use them. And so then a month later, I returned to that school, and we took this class outside and found a bunch of birds. You can go to the next one. Maybe the next one.
No, Robin Tail.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry, I'm kind of getting behind myself.
That one
That
was the
one,
next one?
that-
Okay.
That's the next one. This picture is not taken there. I have no pictures from that because of the nature of the school that we took no photograph. And I put this one in because as we were returning to the school, one of the teachers called to me and said, "Would you stop?" And so we stopped. I turned around and three of the kids were in this position. And they were watching intently. They had their binoculars, and they were intently watching some robins searching for food and searching for nesting materials. And the teachers told me, "Well, just a minute, we're going to wait." We waited for them for 15 minutes. And the teachers at that point were saying, "These kids never stop for 15 minutes for anything." So ever since then, I have had a real appreciation for the power of these, well, in this case, the birds, but nature, to connect where other things do not. Okay, so moving along, the next topic here is relates to since so many of the calls I've had deviate from our original program, which was an hour of classroom followed by an hour or so outside. And just about every time it was a special case. Eventually I got a call from a parochial school in Stillwater by a friend belonging to the church, and they wanted a program. So I met with the principal, and I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? There were 175 kids in this school, and they went all the way from kindergarten to 8th grade. And how do you design something that spans that kind of group? So I did a little bit of research, and I tailored this particular presentation, incorporating some of their basic biblical beliefs, and did some research into the church. And you can take the next one. So what I really came up with was that many of these special schools have their own set of I don't know, I guess I don't know what the word would be. But for example, here, the Bible and the Torah contain hundreds of references to birds. You could spend hours going through doing this. The Quran has many references to birds, including the hoopoe and the crow and others. And of course, everyone's familiar with the role of feathers and birds in some of our native cultures, the bald eagle and so on. And the same thing is true. If you go to South America, all of the Andean countries have the Andean condor as a national bird. Some are even on their flag. So it isn't really very difficult to tie the whole study of birds and nature, you can go to the next one, into something that's important to these people. This is a photo of that 179 kids, 14 teachers, and trying to come up with a program that they could relate to. You can go to the next one too. One of the thank yous that I got from that school, and I can read to you, this teacher had put a note on there. It says, "Sadly, I did not see which bird, sweet little her name, drew for you, and I can't read her writing. And so there's her note on the side, and it says there's her name, thank you, age 5. And I think I see swallow in there somewhere, but I can't read it either, but it doesn't matter. These are in her own words. So this was just an example of, in my mind, flexibility. That is making adjustments to taking into account what every population has. They're all going to be different, and this is just a sample. The last category, I call it humility, and what I mean by that is don't take yourself too seriously, because they won't. Chances are, but take your best effort, and usually it works out. This is a set of photographs describing some of the things that I've encountered. As everyone knows, by the time if you have a school event and you have 3 or 4 classes, by 11 o'clock, things are getting kind of quiet and kind of tough. Well, this is the building at the McCall Ponds Environmental Learning Center in Savage. And a couple of years ago, Steve Weston and I were leading a group here, and it was really slow. And then all of a sudden we noticed up on that roof, which is a sod roof, and the picture here doesn't show it, but there was a mother killdeer with baby killdeer. There isn't anything much more charming or cute than a bunch of little baby killdeer running around. So just that bird alone salvaged the day. So that's an example. You go to the next one. This is another example at the McCall Ponds Environmental Learning Center. I've been saying lately, I don't know, I guess I may have to give this up, because when you have the scope down that low, sometimes it's getting harder and harder for me to get back up again. So I don't know how long it's going to go. But anyway, I call this the light coming on. If you have a child like this and they're looking into the scope and they're squinting back and forth, and and then all of a sudden a little light comes on, and sometimes you even get oh wow, and I never get tired of that. In this case was kind of interesting because we had focused on a kingfisher, and this kid goes, oh, how did you see that? Well, I shamelessly didn't tell her that, well, the bird had just announced himself by chattering all the way around the lake and then perching conspicuously out on the snag sticking out over the lake. But it was that bird made an impression on these kids. So the next one.
About 4 minutes.
Okay, 4 minutes. All right. So this is the last one. Everyone knows this picture, I guess, knows what bird this is, peregrine falcon. But it isn't just any peregrine falcon. This is Soda. Now, Soda was quite famous around Minnesota, and because Soda has a disability. And I'm going to just read a quick page here. This was written by Carol Henderson and appeared in the Minnesota Volunteer magazine some years ago. And he writes, in 1994, a spirited male peregrine named Soda hatched on a nest box atop the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. The falcon fledged that summer before reappearing 4 years later in downtown St. Paul at the North Central Life Tower, where he was nesting with a female known as Meg. When ornithologist Harrison Bud Tordoff confirmed the falcon's identity by reading his band number via a scope, he noticed Soda had 2 toes on each foot that appeared to be half frostbitten off. Quote, for a predatory bird such as a peregrine, this injury could be fatal. Not for Soda, he says. Well, says falconer Jackie Fallon, who had helped Tordoff band the bird. He not only had the skill required to catch enough food for himself, but also enough to feed the female and chicks for about 6 weeks. Stoda successfully nested for 15 years, producing 35 young, and lived until the ripe old age of nearly 19, 5 years longer than the average lifespan of a peregrine falcon. Stoda was an inspiration to many of us over the years, says Fallon, who is the vice president of field operations and coordinator for Minnesota Peregrines. He will always remind me that I can overcome any challenge that life may throw my way. So I have used this example many times with student groups, especially if there are students with some kind of disability. So I guess I have other more photographs, but I guess we're kind of out of time. I don't know. This is a photograph just of my current 3rd grade group. This group this year, there are feeders outside the school there. They noticed a pileated woodpecker and notified Jill, their teacher. So the kids noticed it. They knew from our discussions exactly what it was, and they identified it. So I guess that's about it. If there are any questions, I guess this is these are from the state fair. These are some neighborhood kids that came with me to the fair and did a fantastic job. There's our friend Kurt Ron in the background there. These kids just did a phenomenal job. This is one of my cousin's grandsons. He is now married and has a PhD. So, and there is my favorite Far Side Gary Larson cartoon.
Sid, there's a couple questions.
Okay.
One is, in all of the teaching that you've done of kids in schools, have you ever come across a school that uses virtual headsets for education?
Virtual what?
Virtual headsets.
Headsets. I don't think so.
Hopefully those will come in the future, right? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, right.
And I had a question for you. I was really impressed by how many different methods of teaching you've used over the years with these various kids. But my question is, what have you found to be overall the most effective tool for engaging kids? If that's even if you can even narrow it down.
That's a really interesting question because up until recently, of course, I relied fairly heavily on these touchy-feely boards with photos and feathers and all of this sort of thing. More recently now, we have been showing them how to use the Merlin app to identify bird songs, and that really will grab some of them. But it depends a lot on the age. The younger the children, the more likely they are to relate to something you can actually touch and feel and do something with. And the older they get, the more likely they are to be interested in some of our technology and so on. So I guess, you know, I can't think of any one thing that it just depends on the group, I guess.
Well, Sid, kudos to you. I just think it is such a wonderful thing when people like you go into schools and help kids connect with nature and with birds. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much.